Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about the 2002 dystopian science fiction action film Equilibrium. And the film is set in the fictional future culture of Libria, a totalitarian city-state established by the survivors of World War III. The Libyan government, the Tetragrammaton Council, blame human emotion as the cause of the war, and as a consequence, any activity or object that stimulates emotion is strictly prohibited. The population is also required to take a daily injection of a drug that suppresses emotion. Those in violation of these laws are labelled sense offenders, and the punishment is death. At the pinnacle of the paramilitary forces responsible for enforcing the laws are the Grammaton clerics, who are trained in the martial art of gun kata. Clerics frequently raid the homes of suspected sense offenders to search for and destroy illegal materials such as art, literature, and music, and to execute any violators on the spot. John Preston is a highly effective and high-ranking Grammaton cleric who is highly dedicated to the council and its laws. But when he accidentally breaks his daily dose of emotion-suppressing drugs and experiences brief snippets of real emotions for the first time, he begins to question the beliefs that have anchored his life to this point. He begins to deliberately skip his daily doses of the drug and makes tentative contact with the Underground, a clandestine resistance movement that hopes to end the rule of the Tetragrammaton Council. The council, however, has great power and great resources. Can Preston really keep his shifting loyalties secret from a government that has eyes and ears everywhere? Will his own burgeoning emotions, in fact, the very thing for which he wants to fight, be the thing that betray him? Following his breakthrough success in American Psycho, Christian Bale had a run of significantly less successful cinematic outings, such as Captain Corelli's Mandolin, Rain of Fire, and this film. All three of these films received at best a mixed critical reception and failed to find commercial success either. Or at least failed to find commercial success at the cinema box office. The studio may actually have made money. Hollywood accounting is weird. And in the case of this movie, it seems that Equilibrium had already made a profit before it even came out, thanks to the international pre-sales. And so the studio decided that rather than risk that modest profit, they would reduce Equilibrium's promotion and advertising budget, locking in the small profit that they already had at the cost of losing the chance of a bigger one. Now that suggests that they lacked faith in the movie, which I think is a shame. I enjoyed Equilibrium quite a lot, and I wish it had been given more of a chance to find an audience. But let's talk about what I liked about this film. So, the concept of a dystopian regime that oppresses individuality, freedom of artistic expression, and even thought has been a recurring one in science fiction works. Some examples include George Orwell's 1984 and Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. And the latter work in particular is of relevance here because there are some strong parallels with Equilibrium scenario. Both represent a future society where books have been outlawed and firemen burn any that are found. The main character of Fahrenheit 451 is one such fireman who begins to question those laws and his role in them, much like John Preston, the Grammaton cleric, does in this movie. There's a very clear link between the firemen and the Grammaton clerics, I think. But there are two key differences between these two works, both of them, to my mind, speaking in Equilibrium's favour. The first is that Fahrenheit 451 is a very static, slow work. The resistance that exists in that world is almost entirely a passive one, kind of just simply waiting for the day when it will be safe for them to share their knowledge once more. The resistance in Equilibrium is much more active. It's an action movie, and so the resistance has a proactive agenda to overthrow the current authorities. That means that it has a quicker pace, more dynamic narrative. The second difference, though, and the one that I want to focus on, is that to me, Bradbury's book smacks heavily of elitism. It is books specifically that are banned. There seem to be no controls on painting or music, while television is not only allowed but actively encouraged as a kind of opiate of the masses. Bradbury is clearly sniffing his nose at visual media and discounting its ability to uplift or inform its audience. Of course, as anyone who has watched a David Attenborough documentary will know, visual media can absolutely do both of these things. By changing the ban to cover all forms of art and presumably sport as well, since if there's anything in the world that provokes an emotional response, it's sport, Equilibrium has a far more egalitarian and inclusive view of both art and, by extension, the people who are victims of this kind of oppression. And I approve of that. I think that's a really cool aspect of the movie. Now, the film also has a fine cast who all do solid work. I mean, Christian Bale can apparently be a difficult man to work with, but he's certainly a good actor, and he does his usual solid on-screen role in playing John Preston. And he's ably supported by a fine cast of mostly British actors, including Emily Watson, Angus MacFadyen, Sean Bean, David Hemmings, and Sean Pertwee. That's a lot of talent, and none of them disappoint, except perhaps by the brevity of some of their appearances. Would have been nice to see a bit more of some of them. One of the few Americans in a major role, meanwhile, is Taye Diggs, who portrays one of Preston's main foils in the person of the ambitious, career-conscious Andrew Brandt. This is a challenging role because Brandt has to appear competent and capable of threatening Preston, whose loyalty he suspects, even as he spends most of the film being outplayed and outwitted. And I think Diggs does a really good job of managing that delicate balancing act of being a credible threat while still being kind of constantly outmaneuvered for much of the movie. So yeah, Equilibrium is a smartly made film, and that extends to the visuals as well as the script. The most obvious example is probably the impactful action scenes with their impressive, if not particularly plausible, gun kata martial arts, which are great fun to watch. But they're far from the only strong visual element, however. It's clear that the production team thought extensively about setting, costuming and decoration. For instance, they chose Berlin for most of their location shooting due to that city's unique mix of architectural styles, including many buildings that date to the Third Reich and the Cold War eras. They also deliberately avoided creating any futuristic technology, feeling that such elements would quickly become obsolete or anachronistic. In my opinion, Equilibrium ticks all the right boxes. It's a well-made, well-acted film with more substance than just its pretty visuals, but it's got those too. And if it sounds at all like your sort of thing, it's well worth seeking out. Next time, as the song says, Bela Lugosi's dead, but his films are still around, so let's take a whistle-stop tour through 3 of them: The Dark Eyes of London, Invisible Ghost, and Bowery at Midnight, all of which date from the period 1939 to 1942. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.